Hello and welcome to the Institute of Museum and Library Services webinar, the IMLS Museums Empowered Fiscal Year 2023 information session. My name is Mark Isaacson. I'm one of the program staff in the Office of Museum Services. And speaking on behalf of the rest of the staff, we're glad that you're interested in preparing an application for this Museums Empowered grant program. Here are the topics we're going to cover in today's webinar. Where to find information, overview of the program, discussion of IMLS funding eligibility criteria, a review of the grant program goals, project activities, allowable and unallowable costs, application components, review criteria, where to learn more, and application tips. This is one of a series of webinars designed to help you find the information you need to create a competitive application for IMLS museum funding. Choosing a funding opportunity for 2023 is available as a video and as a PDF on our website at the link identified here. In that webinar, we cover the IMLS vision, mission, and strategic plan. We also address institutional eligibility for applicants. We provide a quick overview of all our funding opportunities and show you how to find information online with a focus on our website. In addition to this webinar about Museums Empowered, we're making available on-demand webinars for all our museum grant programs on our website. The IMLS website is an important place to find information. When you go to the website, you will see a drop-down menu for grants on our homepage. Click on that section titled Apply for a Grant. This section of our website is for you. Each grant program has a landing page on the website, and here you'll find a brief overview of the grant program, along with contact information for the IMLS staff assigned to the program. Our contact information includes a link you can use to directly schedule on our calendar a 30-minute counseling call with program staff. Counseling calls are an important opportunity for you to discuss your project ideas and raise any questions you have about the application process. We encourage you to use this link to schedule a time to talk with one of us. We know that applying for a federal grant can be a complex and time-consuming process, and we want you to feel confident in moving forward with an application. Also on the grant program landing page, you will find a link to the PDF of the NOFO. The Notice of Funding Opportunity, sometimes referred to as the NOFO, is the official instructions and guidance for how to prepare, complete, and submit an application for funding. The text and information I'm using in this webinar derive from the instructions and guidance found in the NOFO. And the NOFO is available for each of the grant funding programs. Now let's discuss Museums Empowered in a little more detail. Museums Empowered is a special initiative of the Museums for America grant program. It's designed to support projects that use the transformative power of professional development and training to generate systemic change within museums of all types and sizes. Projects are expected to involve multiple levels of staff, leadership, and volunteers in a set of logical, interrelated activities tied directly to addressing a key need or challenge. They should also reflect a thorough understanding of current practice and a knowledge about professional development, and also generate measurable results. We're often asked about the numbers of applications in this grant program and the funding success rates. So here are the figures for the just completed Museums Empowered grant cycle. We made 20 awards for a total of about 4.2 million. And you can see those numbers and the distribution of applications by the program goals. Funding eligibility criteria for the Museums Empowered program are detailed in the NOFO, but I'll try to summarize here. All IMLS grant applicants must be either a unit of state or local government or be a private nonprofit organization. In addition, to be eligible for funding in this program as a museum, the organization must use a professional staff, which is defined as having at least one staff member or full-time equivalent, paid or unpaid, that's engaged in the acquisition, care, or exhibition to the public of objects owned or used by the institution. Museums should be organized on a permanent basis for educational or aesthetic purposes, own or use tangible objects, care for those objects, exhibit the objects, and conduct those activities in facilities that you own or operate. Museums, as defined here, may stand alone as independent organizations, may also be a nonprofit responsible for the operating of a museum, or administered by a governing body such as a college, university, or state or local government. If you have any questions about eligibility criteria, definitely give us a call. Now, your application to the Museums Empowered Grant Program should align with one of the 4 program goals and associated objectives. These 4 Museums Empowered Program goals are: Goal 1, provide museum staff with the skills to integrate digital technology into museum operations. Goal 2, support museum staff in providing inclusive services to people of diverse geographic, cultural, and economic backgrounds. Goal 3, strengthen the ability of museum staff to use evaluation as a tool to shape museum programs. And Goal 4, strengthen and support museum staff as an essential part of a resilient organizational culture. So let's take a look at each goal in a little more detail. Goal 1 supports projects that provide museum staff with the skills to integrate digital technology into museum operations. This might involve activities that support staff learning and integration of digital communication platforms and social media tools to enhance audience engagement and community outreach. Could also be activities that support staff learning and integration of digital tools and services to enhance access to museum collections. The emphasis here is on staff learning and integration of these new tools, not just the acquisition of tools. Goal 2 focuses on diversity and inclusion and supports projects that help museum staff in providing inclusive services to people of diverse geographic, cultural, and socioeconomic backgrounds and to individuals with disabilities. Now, this might involve activities that create training and learning opportunities that increase cultural competency of museum staff and enhance relevancy of museum programs, or activities that develop and implement inclusive fellowship, internship, and mentoring programs to increase support for emerging professionals from diverse communities entering the museum field. Goal 3 supports projects that strengthen the ability of museum staff to use evaluation as a tool to shape museum programs and improve outcomes. And this could involve activities that increase staff knowledge of program evaluation methods and the usefulness of evaluation reports, tools, data, and metrics, or activities that provide museum staff with the tools and strategies to adapt evaluation methods to address a specific audience or institutional need. And finally, Goal 4 is about organizational management and is intended to support museum staff as the essential part of a resilient organizational culture. This might involve activities that help you develop and implement a comprehensive organizational learning opportunity, a program of opportunities that address one or more emerging priorities facing your museum. Or it could be developing activities that help you implement programs that address specific learning and growth opportunities identified by a needs assessment. So the needs might come from individuals who have unique needs that you want to address, or they could be priorities facing the museum, either now or in the near future, that collectively the museum is trying to address. Sometimes it's tough to choose a goal. So here are a few strategies to help you select one that aligns best with your project. Think carefully about what's in the center of your project. Who or what will benefit from your work? And what will be improved once you've finished your project? Decide who you want to review your application. What kind of skill set and experience do you want to have? What you want them to have? And list all the activities you plan to carry out and assign to a goal. Which goal gets the most? These are just some ideas about how you might decide which goal is best. But you might wonder why your decision about which goal to choose is so important. Well, because it does impact the review process. Your application will be reviewed by museum professionals who have expertise and experience that's aligned with one of these goals. And in addition, your application will be competing against others who have chosen the same goal. Our advice is to choose one program goal and write your proposal accordingly. We recognize that there's some overlap between the goals, but you should pick one. And like I said, write your proposal accordingly. We'll turn now to allowable and unallowable costs for your project. Be very careful in preparing your proposal and include only allowable costs in both the IMLS grant funds and the cost share part of your budget. We'll go through some common expenses that are allowable and unallowable, but for details, please do look at the 2 CFR 200, which is the essential federal guidelines for cost principles. And these are available online at the links shown here and is highly searchable. In the Museums Empowered NOFO, we provide a partial list of the most common examples of allowable costs. These costs may be part of what you ask IMLS to pay for, or what you'll pay for as part of your cost share. The rules about allowability apply equally to the entire budget. In other words, whether a cost item is on the grant fund side of the budget form or on the cost share side of the budget form, the same rules of allowability apply to all line items in the budget. So for example, here you can put under, as an allowable expense, salaries and wages and fringe benefits for staff. Now, it could be a percentage of their time devoted to the project that you're paying for under grant funds. It could be a percentage of their time that you're paying on and contributing to the project under cost share. Both are allowable. We also provide a list of generally unallowable costs, again, both for the IMLS funds and for cost share. These costs may not be part of what you ask IMLS to pay for, nor can they be part of what you'll pay for as part of your cost share. You know what? Unallowable expenses shouldn't be anywhere in your proposal. So remember to focus your budget and the cost items you include there on expenses that will occur during the period of performance, during the duration of the grant award, and on expenses that are directly related to the activities in your proposed project. And as you prepare your application, it's a good idea to compare your list of proposed expenses against those of the list here of allowable and unallowable costs. If after that you have some specific questions, you can feel free to contact us and we'll be happy to help. Now that you have a basic framework on the amount of funding and the allowable costs for your project, let's review the multiple parts of the grant application that you will need to prepare. The application components are a series of documents you will upload in grants.gov that together make up your application. These application components fall into 3 categories. The first is that of required documents. All applications must include these. The second group is that of conditionally required documents. Now, some applications must include these. It depends on the nature of your institution or perhaps some aspect of your project. The third group of application components are supporting documents. These are completely optional. Your application will consist of a series of individual documents, and it's very important to make sure you prepare and submit everything necessary. So let's look at the required documents. All applications must include 12 required documents, and they're listed on this slide. The 8 documents listed on the left side of this slide are created by you using a Word document or processing software, and then saving that document as a PDF. Instructions for all of these required documents are found in the NOFO. Many of these have page limits, and if you exceed the page limit specified in the NOFO, you must remove the extras before your application goes out for review. Make sure your content fits into the page limit specified, and make sure the number of pages holds when you convert your document to a PDF. The 4 required documents on the right side of this slide include the application for federal assistance, the IMLS supplementary information form, and the IMLS museum program information form. These are online forms that you complete in the grants.gov environment. The IMLS budget form is a fillable PDF. The second category of application components is that of conditionally required documents. Some applications must include one or all of these, and you need to figure out which one is required for you. So, for example, if you're applying as a nonprofit, then you must include your proof of nonprofit status issued by the IRS. If you're using a federally negotiated indirect cost in your budget, then you must include a copy of your final rate agreement. If you will create digital products during the course of your project, then you must complete and submit a digital products plan. The term digital product includes digitized and born digital content, software, and research data. So if you're creating any of these, you should include that plan in your application. The third group of application components is supporting documents, and some documents are supporting documents are completely optional. This is not the place to introduce new information. Some common items in this section might be letters of support from key stakeholders or summaries from studies or reports that help shape the design of your project and could bolster the project justification. You might just have a bibliography of references and related documents. So, for example, an essential supporting document might be a letter of commitment from a consultant that you identified in the project work plan. And that letter might include information that further describes their methodology or approach to the proposed project, or have a detailed cost estimate that further justifies their associated costs in the budget. Another example might be a letter of support from a key project partner, perhaps a community organization or other entity outside of the museum that will be an important part of the project activities. A letter describing their support of the project and providing background on the relationship between the partner organization and the museum would help reviewers understand the context in which the project will be implemented. We also recommend that you be respectful of your reviewers' time. So include what's important and helpful, but stop there. Now let's turn to two specific documents that are very important. The first is a strategic plan summary. IMLS wants to help you achieve your goals, and one of the characteristics of a successful Museums Empowered project is addressing a key need or challenge that faces your museum and is identified in your strategic plan. So what we ask for you to provide here is a summary of your plan, no more than 2 pages, so that reviewers can understand how your proposed project and the activities will further your institutional goals and objectives. You should also indicate when and by whom the plan was approved. It might be your board of trustees or some other group with authority to sign that document. Use a narrative format for your summary. Our reviewers tell us they find a well-constructed, thoughtful, and written summary is the best way to see the connection between your museum strategic plan and the proposed project. The other document I want to talk about here is the performance measurement plan. So this is a new requirement from the federal government that agencies now have to measure the performance of awardees. Performance measurement tells us how good a job you did as a federal awardee. It helps IMLS understand, manage, and improve our grant programs. It's different than project evaluation. Project evaluation, by contrast, is all about your project and your intended results or outcomes. Project evaluation will be covered in the narrative part of the application, following the questions we ask in the NOFO, such as what need you're addressing or what associated results do you want your project to have. But for now, let's turn our focus to performance measurement and how we'll ask you to plan for it and report on it. In the Notice of Funding Opportunity, we provide a sample chart, which applicants may use. You don't require, but you can use it. On the left side of the chart are 4 commonly used measures that IMLS has adopted for this effort. The first is effectiveness, the extent to which activities contribute to achieving the intended results. Next is efficiency, how well the resources are used. Quality refers to how well the activities meet the requirements and expectations of the target group. And timeliness, the extent to which each activity is completed within the time frame. Across the top are the information points we're asking you to use in your statements with examples such as for data, like percentages or hours or things like that. You might have qualitative measures such as observations or opinions or feelings there too. For each performance measure, we provide a couple of examples addressing issues that might turn up in museum projects. The blank space is where we suggest you write your own performance measure statement. We're looking for one statement for each required performance measure, and you may provide more than one if you wish, but just keep in mind that this document is limited to 2 pages. So one statement per measure is quite enough. Among the required components of your application, the narrative is the section that reviewers are likely to spend the most time reading. So let's examine that narrative section in the application. In this grant program, the narrative is limited to 7 pages and divided into 3 sections: the justification, the work plan, and the results. And the questions we're going to ask you to answer and the review criteria are all in the NOFO. But for example, in the project justification, in this first section of the narrative, we ask you to lay out the reasoning for your project. Tell us in the clearest terms possible what you propose to do, what need, problem, or challenge you're going to address, who is going to benefit, and how your project will enhance the capacity of your institution and advance your strategic plan. We also want to know how you're addressing the goals of the museum's Empowered program, using professional development to generate systemic change within the museum. In this section of the narrative, you'll notice a distinction is made between target group and beneficiaries. Target group refers to those who will be most immediately affected by your project. Identify the number of individuals in the target group, or in each target group if you identify more than one. The ultimate beneficiaries refers to those who are likely to be aided in the long term by your project. And that may or may not be the same as your target group. So you want to, again, identify the number of individuals who will benefit in the long term and want some reliable count if possible. Otherwise, you can describe the characteristics of the beneficiaries you expect to be served eventually by your project if you're not able to reliably enumerate them by number. Reviewers will evaluate your proposal and the justification part of your proposal on how well you explain your project and how well you've identified that need, problem, or challenge that you're going to address, and how well you've supported it with relevant evidence, and whether you've clearly identified who's going to benefit. And if it involves an audience, right, how and whether they've been involved in the planning. Because the need, problem, or challenge is foundational in your application, keep these points in mind. The federal government wants its investment to result in something getting better. So as you define your need, problem, or challenge, what's going to get better as a result of your project? You want to define that as precisely as possible. Will someone learn something, develop a skill, or change an attitude? Identify why it's important that this particular change happens, and gather and present data that support your problem. The project work plan is the part of the narrative in which you relay who will do what, when, and using what resources. We asked you to identify and tell us what specific activities you will undertake, who's going to plan and implement and manage your project, and when and in what sequence the activities will occur, and what resources, financial or personnel, are going to be needed to carry out those activities, and how you're going to track progress. Reviewers will evaluate your proposal on how well your activities are informed by appropriate theory and practice, and whether the goals, assumptions, risks are clearly stated. Reviewers want to see that the team you put together has the experience and skills necessary to complete the work successfully, and that your schedule is realistic and achievable. In this section, you want to show how the project team is structured And is it equitable and mutually beneficial to those involved? It's important to see how the project team is organized to support engagement of all participants. They'll also be looking at whether the time and personnel and financial resources are appropriate for the scope and scale of the project. And they want to know if there's a clear methodology for tracking your progress. Remember, the review criteria you're seeing on this slide are listed in their entirety in the notice of funding opportunity as well. So this part of the narrative, the work plan, is really built around the activities that you're going to undertake. So it's important to be clear about what an activity is. It's really something that you do, and it has a beginning and an end, just like projects. And you know when you've finished it because it doesn't need to be done anymore. It's no longer on your to-do list. So an activity in this part of the section should not be a goal or a result or an outcome, but it's something you're going to do as part of trying to achieve those goals. So when you're listing your activities in your work plan, aim for a reasonable level of detail in identifying those activities. Not too much, not too little, but just right. The final section of the narrative is your results. And this is where you articulate the impact of your project. What specific results do you intend to achieve in order to address the need, problem, or challenge that you identified in the justification? Something's going to get better, so tell us what that is. Tell us about the tangible products that are going to result from your project. And talk about what's going to happen when the project is over. How are you going to sustain the benefits of your project beyond the lifespan of this particular project? Reviewers will give us their opinions on how well you've designed a feasible plan for collecting the data, how likely it is that those improvements you propose will be realized, and will those tangible products that you're going to create, are they going to be accessible to the target audience, and whether your plan for sustaining the benefits beyond the project period are reasonable and practical. So just another thought here about results is, when you think back to the questions we referenced a couple slides ago about the need, problem, or challenge, well, now you're going to say, well, what's going to get better as a result of this work? So if you said someone was going to learn something, how will you know? If your problem related to segments of your community getting to work together, how do you know when that's going to be achieved? Or your staff working together? All of your results should tie back to that need, problem, or challenge, right? And have something here in the results that indicates some change has happened. We also sometimes suggest using a logic model. It's a useful tool to help explain your intended results and your plan for achieving them. If you use a logic model, feel free to include that as a supporting document. Many reviewers appreciate seeing one. And if you don't use a logic model, or you're using some other method to map out your activities and tools, you can certainly use that as well. So in summary, considering all the components of your application, there are 4 general characteristics in successful museums-empowered applications that reviewers often see. So as you prepare your application, keep these in mind. First is the institutional impact. So again, revisiting the goal of the program, it's about using the transformative power of professional development to generate systemic change within a museum. We want to see that there's some institutional impact, a change in the culture of your museum, a systemic change within your organization. Second is the in-depth knowledge. We want your proposal to reflect a thorough understanding of current practice and knowledge about the subject matter. Third is project-based design. As we've talked about, project-based design is logical, interrelated activities that are going to address that key need or challenge. And with demonstrable results as the 4th item, it's really that we want to see something measurable that's going to change at the end. An application that has all of these 4 characteristics will stand out in the review process and will have the best chance of success for funding. So I also want to share with you the places to look for more information, such as the IMLS website, where you can find the awarded grant search to learn more about the projects we have funded through the Museums Empowered program. This search tool gives you an opportunity to explore our archive of grants that we have awarded in past years using a variety of criteria, such as institution name, location, or keyword. Your search will reveal basic information about the award, as well as a brief description of the project. This can be extremely helpful as you put ideas together for your own project. We've also posted the narrative and schedule of completion from 6 successful applications from 2022. To find these examples, go to the sample applications on the IMLS website and scroll down the page to find the Museums Empowered examples. Each PDF contains a copy of the 7-page narrative and also the schedule of completion. Many of these samples were identified by our peer reviewers as good examples of well-written applications that provided all the essential information necessary for them to review the application. Looking at these proposals might help clarify your thinking about your own. This is the general schedule of events to show what happens to your application once we receive it. IMLS staff will review it for completeness and eligibility, and you'll hear from us via email if there are any problems. From February through June, your experienced and knowledgeable peers will provide scores and comments based on the criteria outlined in the NOFO. And IMLS staff will examine your budget, your financials, and track record with past and current grants, federal grants. We then prepare materials for the IMLS Deputy Director, as well as the IMLS Director. That person, the IMLS Director, is charged by law with the authority and responsibility to make final award decision. And this happens in early July. In early August, we will notify you by email of the award decisions and provide the scores and comments created by the reviewers. And on September 1st, 2023, your funded project begins. So, in conclusion, I wanted to just share a few tips that we collected from our experience in working with applicants each year. First is to register early. You must have an active SAM.gov registration to register with grants.gov, and you must have a functional grants.gov registration in order to submit an application to IMLS. Now, there's no cost to register on these sites, but it can take from several days to several weeks to get your registration established and validated. So pay attention to this requirement, particularly if this is your first time applying for a federal grant, or if your SAM registration has expired, or if you've had a change in your point of contact for SAM. Start that registration process or renewal process as early as possible. Your SAM.gov registration expires each year, and you must renew it. And you can log into SAM.gov at any time and find out your status. And I would recommend doing that today. Both SAM.gov and grants.gov have their own help desks to assist you with resolving issues or tracking problems that might arise with your registration process. Now, here are some application tips to make sure you meet that deadline. Read the NOFOs. We know it's a long document, but it contains essential information on how to prepare your application. Schedule a counseling call with one of our staff. We're available to answer your questions, and these often come at the start of the process. General questions might be a group call with several folks on your organization. And later you might have a specific question or detailed question about a particular component, and feel free to email or call to ask those questions. Describe your museum well and vividly, and use recent and relevant data to make your point. So reviewers are going to look at the application to try to understand your museum, so be sure to give them a good description of how it operates. Follow the narrative outlined in the Notice of Funding Opportunity, and consider using the same headings to make it easy for reviewers to read and find the information they need. Avoid generalities and jargon. The people who will review your application are experts, but they may not be totally familiar with your particular shorthand. So make it easy for them to understand what you mean. Ask a colleague to read the 7-page narrative with fresh eyes. Ask them to act like a reviewer who's seeing this for the first time, and do it well in advance of the submission deadline so you have adequate time to edit the narrative if necessary. Be sure your application is complete. Check it against the table of application components to be sure you're not missing any required documents. And submit to grants.gov early so you can correct any errors before the deadline. So let's recap. If you haven't already been doing it while listening to this webinar, be sure to go to imls.gov and read the Notice of Funding Opportunity carefully. Check your organization's registrations with both sam.gov and grants.gov. Reach out to a program staff member and schedule a counseling call. Prepare your application and make sure it's complete. And then submit before the deadline, November 15th, 2022, 11:59 p.m. Eastern time. So in closing our presentation today, I want to make sure that you have our phone number and email address for the program staff assigned to work on Museums Empowered. Don't hesitate to contact either of us with questions or concerns. Thank you and best of luck. I look forward to hearing from you.